course, everyone remembers the murder of JFK, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and no one should belittle the threats that sitting presidents face. For each of those rare occasions when an assassin's been close enough to actually pull the trigger, there are dozens of plots that are disrupted before they even get close to that point. But in the historical context, being US president is not that dangerous.
President Kennedy has been assassinated. It's official now. The president is dead.
Assassination has never changed the history of the world. Thus remarked Benjamin Disraeli when he heard that Abraham Lincoln, the American president, had been shot in 1865. So was Disraeli right? Is assassination ever justified? And how can it be prevented? Assassination, the deliberate killing of prominent political figures, is as old as history itself. Egyptian pharaohs, Greek kings, an alarming number of Roman emperors all fell to the assassin's knife. Even the word is an old one. It derives from a sect of Middle Eastern assassins who operated against the Crusaders, against Saladin, against pretty much anybody in the Middle East in the Middle Ages. Bombs, bullets, knives, swords, bows and arrows, poisons, anything really has been used to bring leaders low. In the American context, 4 presidents have been murdered since 1865, all of them shot with a gun.
There's the man with a gun. It's absolute panic.
This week, Donald Trump nearly joined them. That is actually a pretty low casualty rate for national leaders, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the professionalism of the US Secret Service. They may be coming in for a lot of criticism for the security breach that allowed the attempt on Donald Trump's life to take place this week, but on the whole, they are pretty good at keeping presidents alive. But the other reason is just the kind of society the United States is. As the German political scientist Marcel Drisses notes in his recent book, How Tyrants Fall, it's really dictators who are most at risk from the sniper's bullet, the poisoner's teapot, or Count von Stauffenberg's exploding suitcase. And that's because when tyrants have secured themselves against such annoyances as democratic elections or rebellions or even coups by their own military, there aren't really that many other options for getting rid of them. The other thing to note about assassination is that it is difficult. About 10 years ago, 2 American academics, Benjamin Jones and Benjamin Olkin, studied every assassination attempt between 1875 and 2004. That's a lot of data. They found that even when the trigger is pulled, the gun goes off, the bomb explodes, those assassination attempts only succeed 25% of the time.
Here he comes now, dressed in a red sweater, and he's coming out the front door with his daughter Patty Davis and Mrs. Reagan on his arm, both dressed in red. What are you going to do when you get home, Mr. President? What are you going to do when you get home?
Sit down.
Yes, Donald Trump was incredibly lucky to miss that bullet on Saturday night, but he also would have been incredibly unlucky to have fallen to an assassin's bullet.
I heard the shots, and then all of a sudden somebody hollers, "Get down on the ground," and everybody's going down on the ground as low as they can get.
You might think that political assassinations are, well, political, but in the American context, that's not really the case. John Wilkes Booth had a political motive for killing Abraham Lincoln. He was a disgruntled Confederate. He didn't like blacks getting the vote. Leon Czolgosz, who shot President William McKinley in 1901, was a committed anarchist. He believed that the president represented the systemic injustices that were hurting ordinary American people. Again, a political motive. But Charles Guiteau, the man who shot James Garfield, the 20th president of the United States in 1881, was basically delusional. He'd got it into his head that the president somehow owed him to be appointed as ambassador of France. The president had never even met the guy. Lee Harvey Oswald's motives for shooting John F. Kennedy in 1963 are still a hotly debated mystery. But John Hinckley, who shot and nearly but didn't kill Ronald Reagan in 1981, was trying to impress Jodie Foster. That's right, he believed that murdering a president was an act of devotion that the actress simply could not ignore. So we often talk about political assassinations, but out of those 5, only 2 of them had specific political motives. As for Thomas Matthew Crooks, We don't yet know why he tried to kill Donald Trump on Saturday, but that statistic is a pretty good reason to be cautious about jumping to conclusions. So, knowing that national leaders have always been targets for assassination ever since we had any kind of political organization, what can you do to stop it happening? How can assassinations be prevented? Well, the US Secret Service really got into the business of protecting presidents after the assassination of McKinley in 1901. After JFK was shot in 1963, you stopped seeing presidents riding around in open-top vehicles. But it was in 1981 when things really began to change after the attempt on Reagan. John Hinckley managed to get within 15 feet of the president with a handgun before he opened fire. A massive security breach in retrospect. And it was at that point the Secret Service put a massive emphasis on forming an almost impenetrable bubble around the president. You want to get close within handgun range of a US president these days, you are going to be screened, frisked, sent through metal detectors. That bubble is pretty safe. Beyond that is another question. This is one of the interesting similarities between the attempt on Trump and the attempt on Reagan. Crooks was well outside of pistol range, but he was only 150 yards away, well inside rifle range. That is a major security blunder on the part of the Secret Service, and they're already facing criticism for it.
He's on top of the roof. Don't go over there. He's on the roof, buddy.
Studies also show that assassins, whether they're part of a larger plot, whether they're sponsored by a foreign government or are simply lone wolves, all tend to spend a lot of time preparing their action. It's very seldom an impulsive act, and that of course creates more time, more space for security services to find these people and prevent them. But the bottom line is, when people decide to act alone, when they're not part of a conspiracy, just like terrorists, they are difficult to stop, and the threat is always going to be there. So was Disraeli right? Has assassination ever changed world history? Well, history is full of fascinating counterfactuals. John Wilkes Booth did kill Abraham Lincoln, but he couldn't reverse the outcome of the US Civil War. Brutus conspired to kill Julius Caesar to protect the Republic from tyranny, but a few years later, Octavian was emperor. The Republic was dead. Gavrilo Princip's murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in 1914 is credited with sparking the First World War, altering the entire course of the 20th century. But was the conflict coming anyway? And if Russian kill teams had succeeded in their mission to murder Volodymyr Zelensky on the first day of the invasion of Ukraine, would that country have resisted as successfully as it has? The truth is, the impact of assassinations are difficult to quantify, even the failures. Let's go back to Donald Trump.
He has proven to be one tough SOB.
He survived, but he emerged looking like something of an American hero. His face bloodied, his fist raised in defiance against the fluttering stars and stripes behind him. If he goes on to win the election in November, many people will wonder whether that missed bullet is what propelled him to the White House. Defence in Depth is a regular video output by The Telegraph of the big defence stories. If you'd like a daily fix of content about the war in Ukraine, I'd suggest Ukraine the Latest, The Telegraph's podcast. For more defence stories, we've left links in the description below, and if you have a topic you would like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Please do visit our website for the latest updates, news and analysis, or failing that, you could, 2 seconds, buy this, buy the paper.